Got it.
Who wants to do the intro? Do you want me to do it?
I can do it.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fuck Wellness. I'm McKenna.
I'm Mallory.
I'm Lara. Oh.
No, I think that was fine.
For me, it sounded like I said I'm Lara exactly when you said I'm Mallory.
It was a little
I'm
staggered.
Lara.
Well, we're both here. Mallory and Lara. Both here can confirm.
Shocking as it probably is. We're both
Yeah.
here.
I feel like I haven't podcasted in quite some time.
Well, I feel like I haven't been on a podcast with Lara in like a month.
No, it does feel that way.
Because we
I
did
feel a
Eds
little
together, McKenna, but
Yeah.
Lara wasn't there. Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a busy
Well,
summer.
I'm excited.
Busy.
Yeah. So I think that we should do some life updates before we dig into September scheme. That's the next month. In my heart, I wish it was October, but
Me
that's
too.
okay.
No, I'd already be 27 then, and that's just, I'm not ready for that.
I like 27. I like that age.
I'll let you know when I get there.
I haven't lived it, but
Yeah.
it just like feels, you know what I mean? Like
The
20
idea
feels
of
adult.
it does feel adult. That's funny.
yeah. Okay, well, what's new with you guys?
Wait, literally, when was the last time we recorded? I feel like it has been a month, and I think that like it's weird because summer is coming to a close, and for me, like my summer was really awesome, but I also like Bella, our roommate, talks about this a lot, that like summer has this expectation to just be like the best summer of your life. Like you're gonna have the best summer ever. And my summer had some good parts. I also had some really, really, really shitty parts. So like, I don't know. I'm really excited for fall, and like, yeah, it's been good though. What in detail? I feel like my biggest update right now is that I'm moving to nights. So I'm working nights, and it's really horrible because it's still like 93 in Boulder, and I have to try and sleep during the day, which is so impossible when you're so hot. But yeah, just kind of like waking up at 2 p.m. and trying to still like do things during your day before everything closes. It's kind of a rush. But trying to keep a positive mindset about that and switch my body to a new time zone.
Mm-mm. I can't even imagine.
No, I truly think Val and I would not survive.
I would not. Mm-mm.
It's really weird when you get to like the 4:30 a.m. time, and sometimes I'll go on walks outside just to kind of like get some fresh air. And just walking outside and looking around, it's like, wow, everyone in the world feels like is asleep except for me. Like
Pretty much.
and that is sad.
But that is a
Whenever I'm,
fact.
like, up at that- yeah, if I ever happen to be up at that earlier, up at like 5, I love driving and seeing like which house has their lights on. And then I
Mhm.
always am like, what are they doing? Like, why are their lights on at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
or 5 a.m.? And like,
Yeah.
obviously 5 is like a more reasonable time that people wake up, but like still.
I feel like when I drive home, I usually drive home around like 5:45, 6 o'clock. And when I'm driving home at that hour and like seeing everyone else on the road, I feel like there's this weird bond between all of us of being like, wow, what are we all doing right now on this Wednesday morning that we all have to be awake right now? Like, I don't know, it's kind of fun.
Wow.
Actually, it's not fun, but it's like a weird, like, you know, it's an experience. But yeah, what else? I don't know. I went to Leadville, which was fun.
I saw that.
Kind of like a redemption trip for me after the last time we were there. There's an episode about that if you don't know what I'm talking about.
There is.
Yeah, we were like driving around, and when we first got in, I was like, oh my gosh, we should like drive by where those tiny homes were just so I can like have a little like burst of memory. And then like our trip went on and we never like went and drove by the area. And I was like, no, I'm actually good. Like I don't need to.
I thought you were going to say, let's go drive by the hospital.
No, we
Oh,
did
God.
drive by the hospital actually. And I was
Waving.
like, I've been there.
Did you go to the little coffee shop?
So no, we went to dinner though at the restaurant like right next to it, and
Mhm.
it was pretty good. I feel like we went to dinner at this other place though twice, and it was really good food. Like if the three of us do a redemption trip, we for sure have to go. But
Yeah,
it's
I don't
some
think
good
I can go
food.
to that pizza place ever again.
No, we did not go to the pizza place either because I was like, that's also bad vibes. Like I can't.
It was really good. I don't want to like the pizza. It was totally fine. But now in my head, they're connected and I can't do it.
Yeah. Too connected, very viscerally connected, I'm sure for you.
Yeah.
I at least didn't have to re-experience the pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it was nice. And then I did a little trip with my other friends to like not Breck, but kind of like near there, kind of in the mountains. I don't know. I've like been wanting to camp all summer and I have not been able to camp. And that trip was supposed to be a camping trip, but then there weren't enough spots. So I hope everyone who was camping that weekend had a really great time because I didn't get to go camping because of you.
Wow.
We could pull off a camping trip a little later. It just might be a little chilly.
It's gonna be freezing, dude.
I know. I think I went
Like at night.
end of September or early October a few years ago, and it was chilly. But it was fun.
Chili beans. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my update, I think.
Ken?
Hey Mal, what's up with you? No, you go first.
Okay.
You started your job.
Yeah, I started my new job last Monday. It has been going good. Well, it's going well so far. I really, thank you. I don't really have any, work has been fine. Just like trying to transition into the new role and my responsibilities and we can have a longer conversation about it at some point, but it's definitely, I think, going to be a good transition, and I'm getting to do a lot of interesting things so far. Other than that, this weekend has been so lovely. I feel like I haven't had a weekend without something going on in like what feels like forever. So
yeah, when you texted today, like I'm free all day, I was like, Mallory is what?
Is that you?
But to be clear, Jimmy and I went on a 25-mile bike ride this morning. So I did have a productive morning. But I was really I got to read this afternoon, cleaned up the apartment, just kind of relaxed and stuff. So a lovely day. And then yesterday, Ryan and I had a whole date day. We got up and we went climbing, and then we hung out all afternoon, and then we went to dinner, and then we went to a Kennedy Center play or theater show. We saw Dear Evan Hansen, which I don't know if either of you have seen, but it was very, very good. I recommend. So that was super fun. And I feel like we don't go on dates, the two of us, very often. And it was really, really nice. Other than that,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
With you and Ryan, do you feel like how intentional are you about planning dates? Because I know it's kind of hard when you're just living with the person and just hanging out with them all the time. How do you have a system in place of let's try and go on a date every few weeks, or what's right now? What's the thing?
I mean, I think it's really hard living with someone because when you're around them all the time, you feel less motivated to plan a specific date with them. So I don't think we were really very good at that earlier on. But now that I work usually from like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then he has class from 5 to 9 every night. Like I actually really don't see him that often. So we've gotten a lot better at being intentional. And I have it literally up on the refrigerator, but in couples therapy, we've like planned for the semester, like our 5 couple like goals, and they're all kind of mini dates. So the first is we want 3 mornings a week to have like intentional breakfast together, like sitting at the table having breakfast. And we did that last week, which was so nice. And we've gotten into a really good habit of reading before bed. Like we get into bed and for 15 minutes we read. So that has been really good. That was our second goal. Our third was we like climb a lot with our friends, but like it all started because we were climbing just the 2 of us. And so we want to do 1 climb a week that's just the 2 of us, just to kind of have that connection time. We have a neighborhood walk that we love. And so our goal is to go on that 2 times a week and then work out the 2 of us 1 time a week. So I would say that doesn't really answer your question, but we don't plan like big date nights like what we did last night that often, but we're trying to find like little dates in our week. Because I think that's more sustainable for our lives than the big like glamorous dates.
Going to play.
Well, and it's something that you guys both are already going to do in your day. And so you
Yeah.
might as well like find a way to have an intentional time together. Whereas it's like different if we're like, we're going to try and go out to dinner like twice a week, just us. Like that's a little different, I feel.
Yeah. Anyway, so that has been really fun. I feel like my relationship with Ryan has really like never been better. We're like thriving.
Aww.
And I feel really good about it. Yeah. But wedding planning, not as much fun. Don't recommend to anyone. Don't get married. This is my PSA. I'm kidding.
Or get married and don't have a wedding.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm on that boat now. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many updates because there are no updates, which is part of the stress. It's so funny. Like, I don't care when I get married. Like, I truly could care less, but there is that pressure once you get engaged of like, I've had 3 friends get engaged in the last like 3 months and they are all already have dates and venues set for next year.
Wow.
And I'm like,
shit.
oh, cool. Okay. Got engaged in like early May. And all of these people have dates in the months that I want to get married in next year. And I'm like, this is really feels like a competition when it's like not actually, but it's like, oh, I see someone get engaged on Instagram that I'm friends with. I'm like, well, fuck, if I'm invited to their wedding, what if they pick a date that I want to have a wedding on? Anyway, it's a whole thing. I'm done with it. It's a lot.
I can't believe you guys have been engaged for so long already.
Yeah.
Like it's not so long, obviously, but just like in my head, it's like last weekend. Like we were hiking.
Well, that's how it feels to me. And then I remember that that it's like quote unquote long in like the world of engagements to then not have a date yet. But I don't care, Anyway, Ryan's giving me a look. Oh, okay. Anyway. Yeah, I would say those are kind of all my big updates. I don't have any travels really happening for the whole fall, except for going home for my friend Anna's bachelorette party and also her wedding. So
Fun.
2 different times. Yeah, I'm excited.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ken?
Yeah, I just got back from Japan, so that was good. I think when we recorded the Ed podcast, I had mentioned I was nervous about my COVID test.
Yes,
in
you
that
did.
podcast, and it in fact did not go well. So if you were wondering, on the edge of your seats, wondering about that, wasn't a hit.
I feel like that's an understatement. It didn't go well.
Yeah. Like
take us through the whole thing because the story is pretty.
Okay, so basically, at the time, Japan was only accepting PCR tests for sure. So not rapid PCR tests, although like sometimes they would let them in, sometimes they wouldn't. In my head, I was like, rather not risk it. Like, let's just get a normal PCR because the guidelines were literally changing almost every single day. And so, which is what like the airline told us as well. And so I went to this place. I went at opening time. about 72 hours before I left, because the window was 72 hours. And I got there and they're like, oh, just kidding. We don't do PCR tests anymore. And even though their website says that they do. And so I was like, okay, that's really annoying. And I tried my best not to like take it out on the employee, but I was like, I mean, just a thought, like maybe you should update your website. I told them, I was like, think about it. I don't know. And he was like, we can't do that. And I was like, literally, why? I was like, okay. And then I walked out and I was a little bit bitchy, but upsetting. And so I got home and I got on like Walgreens' next appointment, which was the following day at 10 a.m. So now we're 48 hours before departure.
Ooh.
Yeah. Originally Walgreens on the site says like test results come back 24 to 48 hours. So I was like, we are golden here. Like, who's getting PCR tests? Like, not that big of a deal. I take it Saturday morning. I know that on Saturday at 2 p.m. the test was picked up by the lab. And so I'm like, okay, we're in good shape here. Like, we have quite a few hours, 36 hours or so to like make sure this gets in. And basically, long story short, it does not get in. It is not received at the lab until I think it was, so I was supposed to leave on Monday, and it did not get into the lab until Monday, basically.
Oh my God.
So yeah, Monday morning, my flight was at 7 a.m. 7:45. So Monday morning, I got on the 4:15 a.m. bus from Boulder, bussed to the airport, went up to the ticket counter and was like, listen, my test isn't going to come back. Can I just I had a connecting flight in San Francisco. So I had to fly Denver, San Francisco, then San Francisco to Tokyo. And I was like, can I just get to San Francisco? And then I can be stuck in San Francisco. I could maybe just stay the night in Davis, whatever. They were like, no, you have to have a negative COVID test to even get on your domestic flight. And so I got my booty back on the bus, came all the way home. So at this point, I'm on the bus for like literally 5 hours because it was so slow that morning. And I had like 3 hours of sleep. I'm so stressed. I immediately, and we could talk more about this, but like the narrative going on in my head is not a healthy one. And I basically get home and that whole day was horrible, as Lara witnessed firsthand. I like couldn't find another test. No one had the test I needed. Like literally it was like one after the other, like horrible circumstances. Like while I tried to get a last minute rapid PCR Sunday night at Walgreens, I got there like 15 minutes before they closed because they were like, come on by, we'll see if we can do it. And then they were like, so sorry, our system like won't allow you to print this barcode so that you can take this test. So we can't do it. And I'm like, okay, great. So I'm calling like all these places within 3 hours of me of like, can I go and take a test somewhere? Everyone's like, either no, we don't have PCRs anymore. No, we're understaffed. So they took those tests away from us. And I couldn't, the only other place I could go was like an ER, like an urgent care. And they would have charged me an urgent care visit to get like a test. And the test at Walgreens, guys, $130 already. Okay. So I'm already like, I can't spend another like $200 or more to get this test. And so finally at some point, Lara and Kai were like, I think you just got to call it. Like, if you're either going to get the test back or you're not going to get the test back, and we'll figure it out in the morning. And so I went down to Denver with them, spent the night there, and then Kai drove me to the airport in the morning. Once again, the airline basically, very kind of them, just switched my flight to the following day. It's the same exact flight, just 1 day later, 24 hours later. And so I'm sitting at the airport. Yeah, they didn't charge me anything.
Yeah.
What?
Thank God there were seats on that next flight and they weren't like.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of lucky because in Japan isn't open to tourists right now. So you had to have a business visa. So like the flights weren't full. The flights to Japan weren't full at all. And so the next day, Kai drops me off at the airport and they go and they wait like in the cell phone lot to like basically gonna wait until at that point I was convinced I was not going. So I was like, my test isn't back. There's no way it's going to come back within the next like few minutes. And then like a few minutes after I got to the airport, about an hour-ish before my flight, the test results came back. And I was negative. And then and it took forever to get through like all the hoops that you have to jump through. But then I got on a plane and I went to Japan.
That's so
When you
tumultuous.
Yeah.
when you got on that plane, were you just like, is this real? Like,
No, it truly felt when
I
I
feel
got
like
to
you
San
were so
Francisco-
convinced you were not going.
Oh, I was fully convinced I wasn't going. And at that point I didn't even want to go. I was like, this is not worth, like, no trip is worth the stress of like these last 48 hours. And I'm glad I went because it was an amazing trip. But I think I was just not in a good spot. I was so unwell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How are you
There's
feeling
also
now?
I feel good now. I mean, like I said, the trip was great, but like there was also a bunch of other things happening in my life at the same time that were big stress inducers. And so I don't think that I handled the stress of it very well. And I don't know, I've told you guys both this, but like I don't think I coped very well. I talked to my therapist about it, and it was I just like a very strong inner critic came out when I thought that when like the mistake was on me basically for not getting to Japan, even though like I could have done some things differently for sure, but there also was a lot of factors that were like completely out of my control.
Yeah.
So just dealing kind of with the aftermath of that inner critic is still pretty tough because it's just how fast, like, I don't know, I just realized that like I can regulate my nervous system as long as I continue to be like the version of myself that I hold myself to, like that standard. That didn't really make sense, but like I can regulate my emotions when I feel as though I didn't make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And the second that I feel like the fault was on me, I cannot really cope with that. So it's kind of like I've done all this work and in therapy and over the last few years and like have come so far, and it's just like a scary moment to watch it kind of unravel in a moment where my system is so unregulated or deregulated, I guess. I don't know what the right word would be, but and have it just, it's just kind of like a scary moment to like realize that you've been fine and you've worked through things while you're still maintaining what you think is like a bare minimum of like perfection in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, that was a rough. Also, the Douglas element of that as well, of the night before your flight, Douglas was being so bad. And I just felt like everyone was like on their last string. And it was like, okay, let's just all like.
Yeah. The week up, like going up to me leaving, he was horrible.
Yeah.
And so I was scared about leaving him and that he would be horrible all week. And then, which he was partially. And then, yeah.
He's a growing boy.
Mhm.
Any
Testing
other
boundaries.
life updates, Ken?
I don't think so. I'm coaching volleyball again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been fun. Other than that, we're just getting through.
Okay.
I was gonna say, like, I am pretty like famously not a fan of summer. I really just hate summer. I always have. And I'm trying to be, or this summer I tried to be more appreciative of it, but I am very excited for the fall. And I don't think my summer wasn't very fun. And so I think that I'm also excited to like have more fun in the fall and winter.
I feel like you've had 2 rough summers in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. So
Yeah. Summer of
We'll see.
2023 gonna be different.
yeah, maybe.
We at least have one trip.
Where are we going?
What are we doing in June of 2023, Ken?
Oh my God, you're right. We do
Okay,
have
but
one trip.
we can't really say it on the pod though.
It's a secret.
Yeah, secret trip.
Yeah.
All right, should we talk about our theme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited about this
I'm
month.
excited too. This is also like a very timely month for me.
Okay,
I
cool.
feel. Yeah.
This is always a
I wanna
timely
hear more
month for me.
about
What do you mean?
Oh, I
Is
just
it
always,
your birthday?
no, I always have thoughts on our theme.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay, hit us with our theme.
Okay, our theme is faith/religion, which I actually kind of want to dig into the difference between those. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I guess I kind of like to frame it, and we talked about this with like when prepping our guests for this month, is the intersection of how faith and religion can impact your well-being, both in like a positive way and for some people maybe a not so positive way. And so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about like our relationships to those two words, and then kind of like the concepts of them and how they've either been like a source of well-being or not in our lives. And maybe like there have been times that they've been both. And again, it kind of depends on your definition. So I think I'm really excited about it.
I feel like this theme has been like in the what's the phrase? In the curtains? In the
In the background?
you know what I'm saying? No, like in theater. So put yourself in like a theater. Like it's been in the
Oh, in the wings.
wings waiting to be had for a really long
Local
time.
theater girl, just here in case you ever need theater terminology.
You know what I
Yeah.
almost said?
Thanks
I
so
said
much.
on deck. That's
I
not
mean,
correct.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I agree,
Just 'cause,
Lara.
like I feel like you have like especially in college, like you were so like into this
We'll talk
this
about
thing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, I thought that we could start just first, maybe just like briefly talking about what we feel like the difference between faith and religion is, if we think that there's a difference, because I feel like we need to start with that before maybe we talk about our own experiences with those terms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious about Ken's opinion on this, so I'm actually going to throw it to Ken.
You first.
Full
I'm
disclosure,
probably
I've
going to just
not-
be like second to whatever Ken says, so that's why I want Ken to go first.
So, full disclosure, I haven't sat down with this question. So my answer might be different if I had sat down and kind of thought about it for a while. Religion to me feels much smaller than faith in a way. Like religion to me has a pretty clear like definition or like relationship to what we connect with, like what religion is, like seems pretty clear. Faith seems like way more broad.
Yeah.
I think that with religion, not that there's like kind of one religion that we can connect to, that there's like a lot of different religion, but religion to me very much is like tied. And I don't know much about religion, so that's like the other disclaimer, but feels very tied to like religious texts in a way, and like certain belief systems that are pretty concrete in what they believe, I guess. And faith to me feels like everyone can have faith in whatever. You can have faith in the world or whatever kind of higher energy you believe in. Even if you don't believe in, you can have faith in humans, you can have faith in nature. Like there are so many different ways to have faith, I think. So that would be my very brief distinction between the two.
I feel like I've been thinking a lot how the term faith has sort of been co-opted by like a lot of like, I don't even know if like religious groups, but I just think about all of like the stereotypes of the white Midwestern families with the giant like love faith posters in their houses. Do you know what I'm talking about? And and I feel like in that case, what they mean by faith is like faith in like God. Which I think is what, when I hear the word faith, I immediately am like, oh no. Like that's not a word I identify with. But when I was reflecting on it today, I don't know. I was like, well, I can have faith in myself. Like it's just a word. So yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting kind of thought. But I guess when I'm thinking about this month, I'm thinking of faith as more of like a religious faith, I guess, for the purposes of these conversations. I don't think it has to be tied to that necessarily, because I think that there are lots of different types, but that was sort of, I don't know. I'm curious to see where people find faith being a helpful tool for them, especially like unconditional faith, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like undying faith, essentially, in something, rather than maybe more of like a critical outlook on something, which I think can also both benefit and be a detriment to well-being at times.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Faith has a lot of layers, I guess. I guess so does religion.
Yeah.
I wrote this like thing yesterday and I just remembered that I wrote it. It's very random, and full disclosure, I don't know if it makes sense. So, but I'm going to read it and we can talk about it.
Let's
But
hear it.
basically, like faith came up in like something I was thinking about yesterday, and I just wrote this phrase and no context around it. Okay. So was not even like journaling about faith. I just said, so, and this is more in terms of like calling things into your life, like what if you like faith in that you will receive something that you want, I guess. And so I said, faith in what happens doesn't really matter. It's the belief that when something arrives, you are fully deserving, you feel fully deserving of that thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't
think that
really
makes
know.
sense.
Yeah. It's essentially like we focus so much on like, oh, I'll just remain like steady in the fact that something is coming, and like I'm putting full trust in that it's coming. You can do that, but I also feel like the work comes in like preparing for when that thing comes. You know?
Yeah.
Like that's
Wait,
like
and what is the last thing you said about being deserving of the thing that comes?
of like when something comes, like you feel fully deserving of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
You
because
know?
it could hit you in the face, but if you don't feel
Yeah.
like you deserve it, then you might not even take it up
Yeah.
on it, you know?
Yeah. I just feel like we focus so much on like that first part of like, I don't know, I just, it'll be figured out, or like God will provide, or like, whatever you think. And I just think it's funny, like it's basically me saying like you have to put action into like what you'd like as well.
Yeah. Okay, I kind of want to dive a little bit into like our own relationships with religion,
Okay.
because I think that might be a good beginning to kind of the context of this month.
Yeah.
Who wants to
Do
start?
you want to start?
Sure. Well, yeah, we talked about this before we started recording. I prepped questions, not answers to the questions. So this is a classic Mallory stream of consciousness response, in case anyone was curious. I grew up with two sets of families, as everyone who listens to the podcast knows at this point. And my dad, and I'm sure he would say it on the podcast, is not a religious person. He was raised Catholic. His whole family was very Catholic. He and his three brothers were all raised Catholic, and they are now all liberal atheists. So I think that's kind of an interesting transition. But my dad was very vocal growing up that, he didn't believe in God, that there was really nothing going on out there outside of just our existence, that when we die, life is over, etc. And I think my mom maybe was slightly more agnostic than my dad was. She definitely, and McKenna knows this, has more of a spiritual side to her. And I think she likes the idea of there being like more out there, but she definitely doesn't believe in, I think, the like Western versions of God or anything. But I think she's always like loved the idea of ghosts. This is just a side note, but she like really loves ghosts and it's like kind of obsessed with them in a weird way. She's going to be like, "What, Mallory?" She listens to this. But anyway, so I think it was really interesting. I grew up going to the Unitarian Universalist Church with my mom, and that was such a cool experience. And honestly, as I've gotten older, I think I am only appreciating it more and more, the more like I look back on how unique the experiences I had at that. They don't really a church is like a weird term. They're really a congregation of people who come together every Sunday to be better people. There's no discussion of God or like religion really, like, or organized religion. It's all kind of the tenets of being a good person. And well, I went to youth group there, and we studied all the world religions, and we had so many reflections and conversations about it. And at the time it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but now I'm like, oh, I don't think most people got to experience that. So anyway, big fan of the Unitarian Universalist Church. I got to college very much identifying as an atheist at that point. And first semester of my first year at GW, I took a class called The Historical Jesus and became obsessed with the professor, and also just the concept of the New Testament and the Gospels, and not from a religious or like theological standpoint, but I was fascinated with all of the like research and history on the Gospels and on Jesus that I'd never heard any of my religious friends talk about. Kind of like all the inconsistencies in the Gospels, and all that we know about Jesus that isn't in the Bible. And so I ended up taking 5 classes with this professor throughout college, and still like probably my favorite professor, one of my favorite professors to this day, and ended up getting a minor in religion. And my like specialty was in early Christianity, and like especially on the historical Jesus. So I have read the whole Bible. And I think it's really been an interesting journey for me, because I still identify with the term atheist, but not because I don't think I'm spiritual. It's just, for me, I guess I don't believe in the westernized version of a God. And that makes me feel like the term atheist works for me. Like that label feels true, because I don't believe in any of the current religions that exist, or that there's like someone up there with marionette strings, like, organizing everything that we do, or if we pray enough, like that will change the outcome of our existence. So I think part of that is how I was raised. And part of that too was kind of digging into it in college and really like getting to look into the religious texts. So yeah, that's sort of my relationship to religion. And that's where I am today. Questions, thoughts, feelings?
I wish that I could have taken all of those classes.
Oh,
So interesting.
maybe on one of the episodes I'll give my historical Jesus hot takes.
Yeah, and maybe your book list.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most people are gonna want to read these books. They're very dense. But yeah, we can do that at some point.
Yeah. Lara, do
Okay.
you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So it's my religion, or my experience with religion in my life.
I mean, you can say
Or
whatever
religion
you
in
want.
general. Okay, but what
Yeah.
was your question?
Yeah, you're like basically your relationship or evolution with religion.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up like as a child with my parents taking me to church every Sunday, and Sunday school. We walked down to like near the farmer's market. There's like this little Presbyterian church, and we were super involved in that church. Like my dad taught Sunday school, like we were like really, really into it. And then I think that like I started synchro, and it was just like, we kind of like, our involvement with that we couldn't just sustain everything that we were doing. We just got too busy, Jacob and I. And so we stopped going to church fully, and like, whatever. But I actually like have a really, 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 really distinct memory of being super young. And my dad was in charge of like taking like what's like the donation thing? Your communion, was in charge of taking.
Nope, just kidding.
Wait, what'd you say?
I don't know.
Okay. You know when like they pass around the bowl?
Tithe, like you tithe, not till, like you tithe.
It isn't, yeah, tithe is like, yeah, what you pay.
I think those.
But what's that called?
Girl,
we are clearly not the right audience for these questions.
God. Okay, if you know, then you know what I'm talking about. So
If
my
you know,
dad was
you
in charge of
know.
taking all like the donation, whatever thing that happened during the service. And he was in charge of taking it to the basement of the church and like putting it in the huge safe. And I remember going down there, and that was the same room that the Boy Scouts used to learn how to tie all their knots. And my dad would like let me play around in the Boy Scout room as he was like getting all the money sorted and like putting the money away. And it's actually so fucked that in Girl Scouts I didn't get to learn all the knots. That's separate.
That would be so useful.
It was so sick. It was a wall full of rope, and you just learned how to do all these knots. So I'd always play with them.
There's a whole daily episode on this that I'll link in the bio about Boy Scouts versus Girl Scouts.
Perfect.
Boy Scouts versus Girl Scouts.
The ultimate showdown. But yeah, so we just like stopped like very abruptly doing that. And we would still, every time that we would go to visit my grandma in Texas, we would always go to church with her because she also taught Sunday school and was super involved with her church. But at that point, it was kind of like I was conscious of how, like, you can tell that some church is like, and some churches like, that's good. And I really enjoyed going to that church because the pastor was like this super, super amazing, like very butchy lesbian. And I was like, this feels correct. Like, this feels amazing. Like, I get to see my grandma singing on stage, like whatever. And so that was really fun still. And then like my next, basically there was like not a lot of religion in my life. And then my next headbutt into religion was when I went to Coast Guard Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've talked about this before on the pod, but like very immediately like into it, because that's just what you do. Like, you go to church twice a week, you do like, you know, all the songs, you know, all the things, like, and it helps you because believing in something else and believing in like literally just believing in something helped that time in my life because it was a struggle. So yeah, but that still felt like a little bit like icky, where it was like, it was kind of like the religion, the Christianity version that's like, love the sinner, hate the sin. Like, don't, we'll love you if you're gay, but like if you have like gay sex, do not talk about it. Like, do not bring that to this church, because like we'll still love you, but whatever. So that felt icky. But I was still super, super, super into it just because like that's what you did. And they had good snacks. So I went to a lot of church then. And then ever since, like, it's kind of interesting because like thinking about your question of like faith versus religion, I think that like I see it as like faith is this big thing that you're kind of like, you either have, like, everyone is kind of like steady in their amounts of faith. I kind of think like I think that I've maintained a fairly steady version of faith in that, like, I definitely like think that the universe is kind of the higher power that I, you know, say thank you to, or that I go to bed and like kind of talk to. Like, I wouldn't call it praying, but like we've also talked about it on the pod where like there is a dialogue in my head some nights when I'm just like really in the dumps and I'm just like trying to send vibes out to the universe and be like, help me out, bro, like help me out. Whereas religion, I think, is like more of the socially constructed, like the churches and the documents and the songs and the practices. And I think some of that can be super beautiful too. Like, one of my favorite things while traveling and that we did when I was in Italy is just like walking around the towns and going inside the really small churches and like just feeling that, I think, is really beautiful. And like, I can recognize that there are beautiful things that were made around religion, but there's also a lot of really scary shit that has come from the rules that have been set up and the persecution and all of that of certain people's lives. So like,
in the wars,
like a lot of really ugly, bloody, horrible things. So I don't know. It's like, I think religions people come in and go out of based off of like their lives a little bit and how it fits in that set of rules. Whereas faith, like I think a lot of people like stick with their faith even if their religion comes and goes, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. My turn.
Mm-hmm.
Your turn.
Okay, here we go. This is an interesting conversation for me to have right now because I don't feel super steady in my own spirituality, and that's been just shifting like a lot. And so it's almost like a little bit painful, I think, for me to have these conversations because I just feel really confused, and not confused at like what the core of my beliefs are, but confused as to how I would like to engage with it. With religion, I've talked about it before. I did not grow up religious at all. And then like when I was a teenager, I started to learn a little bit about it on my own, but that didn't really continue for very long. And then shortly after that is when a lot of like the spirituality stuff came into place. I still feel like very uneducated in religion. Like I don't know the ins and the outs. I don't know the stories in the Bible. Like I don't really know those things. I did also go to Catholic school for a semester, and that wasn't so great. So I think that didn't leave a great, impression of Catholicism on me. And I think I just have never really understood how, like, to me, I guess what religion does is like takes things that seem like inconceivable to the human brain and like put them into a like, I don't know, a way that feels digestible through like stories and like lessons and rules, right? So it's like if you have to decide what is morally right or wrong on your own, that's a much more difficult decision than if something tells you and there's people that are abiding to these set sets of like morality to what they think is true. And so like I think in those ways it makes some of like that anxiety go away, but then it also like really limits expression and self-expression and individuality and sexuality, and there are a lot of like deep issues with that. And then we can like think about the flip side of religion of like money, control, power, politics. Like those are all things that having a set of rules that people follow helps, because then they the people who are in charge or in power get what they want, or however it looks like. So I don't know, I feel like I don't feel connected to religion whatsoever. I do feel like I have my own definition of God, and so but it's not like Mal said, it's not kind of like one being kind of like playing with its puppet strings in the sky. Like that is not my definition of God whatsoever. And yeah, I think that spirituality does the same exact thing of like creating these labels so that it's digestible for people and people can like hold on to something. Whereas I think there is something to hold on to. I just don't think that it's necessarily able to be defined in like a really concise way. Yeah, that's my little spiel. Oh, prayer. I don't mind the word prayer. I like the word prayer now. And I view things like the way that I view prayer is not necessarily like, okay, I'm praying to God. I view it as like, and essentially prayer to me is like an intention I am setting and I'm putting energy behind. So like, I do personally think that there are times, not that prayer can always swing something, but I do think that there are times where like people put thought energy towards something else outside of themselves. And I do think that has an energetic impact. And so that's why I don't really mind the word prayer or like the action of praying, because to me, it's just like a way to conceptualize, like I am funneling this to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting because I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, but my relationship with religion has been the only times that I have like believed in God has been when I felt superstitious or like been really, really anxious and felt like I needed someone else to control a situation. I think I've talked about this on the podcast, but like from maybe the ages of like 7 until pretty recently, like every single night I would pray to God and like ask them to protect my parents. And it was just because as a kid, you feel so out of control. Like you have no way to protect your parents. And you're like, look, I don't know if I believe in God, but like, might as well just do this. Cause you know,
gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt. But I remember feeling so icky about it because I was like, I don't believe in God really, but this is like me being so fearful and anxious that like, I feel like I have to do this in order to feel like my parents are protected. And I feel like I started to get that way a little bit, even just in like some of the quote unquote spirituality spaces. I found myself getting very like fate focused of like, oh, it's everything is predetermined for me, like kind of that part. And I really don't like that part of religion where it takes like the active participant out, like piece of your life out, where like, oh, if there's a plane crash and everyone dies, like, well, maybe ultimately that was a good thing for society. You know, it's hard for me to get on board with like that kind of narrative that like bad things, I don't know, happen, but they're ultimately a good, like they were meant to happen. Yeah. I don't know. I just like, I really struggle with that. So yeah, the point of all saying this is like, I think the times that I have felt most religious are like the times where I'm feeling the worst about myself or control in the world or like my family's future, etc.
I think like that's a super good point, that like religion or faith is a really, really dependable way to take away from icky feelings. Yeah. Like if I'm feeling unsure, like really like nervous about a situation, well, I'll just like pray and hopefully that'll make me feel like I'm doing something and it'll take away from that icky feeling. Or like when people say like, oh, well, that horrible thing happened, but it was meant to happen. Like that's just because that icky feeling, we don't know how to respond to that, or
we want to give it a reason. We want to give it a purpose.
We want to kick it away ASAP. And that's a really good way to do it, is to be like, well,
yeah.
Sorry, I think horrible.
Oh no.
Yeah, we're good.
I think that with the God thing, Mal, that you were just describing, I would do something similar, but I would do it in a way of like praying to God and then almost being like, well, if something happens to me, remember that one time I prayed? Remember I did believe? Like feeling like I was going to be judged. And even without, I've also talked about this before, I think on the pod, but even without the structure of religion in my life, I still felt as though I was judged a lot of the time. Like something was judging me. And I didn't enjoy that feeling very much. And then off of what Lara was just saying, like that is my biggest issue with spirituality or religion, is like the bypassing that happens of human emotions is hands down like the biggest issue I have, because it's just like not sustainable to then continue to push. And in reality, like if we're actually breaking it down and we believe in a higher power, like even then things would still be working together, you know? So it's still kind of like, and I don't know. There's also things that are completely random, I think. And there are things that are not coincidences. But the way that I like to look at some of like the world in a way is like, no one's sitting there kind of laying a path out for you and being like, this is exactly the path that you must take to like get X, Y, and Z thing, and pulling those strings to make that happen. But I do think that there can be things that are in your life that give you the opportunity to take certain steps that might be more beneficial to you than others. And I think that we feel maybe what those things aren't through our human emotions when it doesn't feel like we're in a good situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I think for like a simple example for this would be like meeting a friend or a romantic partner. Like it might not be like quote unquote fate that you were supposed to meet. But I think that there are times where people are kind of in our orbit for a reason. And it's like, you know, have you ever met someone where you're like, oh, that's so weird. Like 3 years ago, we were at the same place together, and now we're in a different state, and we just somehow ran into each other at a coffee shop or whatever. Like, or when people look back and are like, oh, we were in this picture together randomly and we were strangers and now we met and we're best friends. So I think that there are sometimes things that are kind of randomly and somewhat chaotically happening that do have like a little bit of intention behind it. But I don't think that that's necessarily like someone manipulating that.
Yeah.
I also think to some degree, like we create our own meaning in our
fully,
lives too. So, you know, if I feel like you could have that situation where you're like, oh, I met someone that I was in a photo with like 3 years ago and I didn't know I'd ever meet them again. But you could choose to find no meaning in that situation, or you could choose to find meaning in it. And I don't think either of those are like bad or good choices. But I think when it's like, when people are like, oh, well, do you believe that everything happens for a reason? I think that you can find meaning in everything that happens, or like find purpose or, you know, growth from it. But I agree with your point that like, I don't think that necessarily means that things were predetermined, like, or that they're just fate. Like, I think that we can find meaning in everything, but we don't necessarily have to, or we don't need to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you can still also find meaning and then also like not really care that much or have that not impact your life. You know, like let's say you meet the person that you end up marrying, and that same situation, you're like, oh, our families, we never knew each other, but like our family stayed at the same vacation house, you know, every summer. Cause some like weird stuff that happens like that, you could find meaning in that of like, that was cool, but then not have it like impact decisions. Like, let's say 10 years later, you're getting divorced. Like that doesn't take away the previous situation, you know?
Yeah. I feel like the only other thing, we can start to wrap up a little bit, but I feel like Lara, you are not having a good time.
My feet are like this right now. Like,
oh no. The last thing I just wanted to say is, and I'm really curious to hear our guest perspective on this, but I haven't really like found religion to be a source of well-being or like a detriment to well-being. Like I haven't really felt in my life that I've connected the two a ton, just because it has not been a central part of my life. But I think to my point earlier, like it has been maybe a detriment to my well-being in situations where I was craving control and instability, and I used God and maybe the tools of religion in order to feel stable. And again, I think that kind of gets down to the nuance of that may have increased my well-being in that moment because it gave me a sense of control, but how did that impact me in the long term? Like I wasn't able to fully cope with maybe the emotions or the things I was feeling because I was relying on like the concept of God.
Yeah. I think that's really a normal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think that, sorry, you're gonna have to cut this out. I'm going through like the contraction.
Oh.
Right as I was gonna say something. Yeah, I don't think that religion itself has really like super benefited my life or super ruined my life. Is that what you said, Mel? Kind of that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely like the point in my life when I most used it, when I most needed something to believe in, was definitely at Coast Guard. But I've also like, I don't think it's had an opportunity to ruin my life because the two things that come to mind is like, one, I've never needed an abortion. So like, I've never had that access taken away from me because of how people think in religious ways. And two, I've never been a part of a religious organization that has somehow like banished me or kicked me out, or like, I'm glad that my family isn't entrenched in that thing, and that like my sexual identity like does not have, you know, that like I'm not at risk of like having really bad things happen in my life because of that. So I think I'm very lucky about that, but also, yeah, can be pretty fucked up. Also.
Yeah. I want to be clear that, me saying that religion, also hasn't been necessarily like a detriment to my life. Like I also I don't like most aspects of religion. Like I think, first of all, I feel like maybe we should caveat this. There's like so many different types of religion, like so many. And I guess when I think of religion, I think I immediately am thinking about like westernized versions of religion. So like I'm thinking about Christianity and Catholicism primarily. And that is already a bias of mine that I think when I think of religion and maybe like my experience is religion, that's immediately what I'm thinking of. So I guess when I'm saying that it doesn't detriment, I'm thinking of those not directly impacting me. But I think to your point, Lara, like I hate aspects of religion and how they treat people a lot of times. And just there are so many problematic aspects to organized religion. And though it hasn't, directly impacted me, I did write my one of my senior papers in high school on how angry I was on the fact that I would probably never be president because I was an atheist, and how our political system rewards people who believe in God and who are openly vocal about their belief in God. Though I think it maybe is slightly changing, but with our generation, so there are so many fewer young people who are identifying with a certain religion. You can look up Gallup polls over time, and it's pretty wild how quickly millennials and Gen Z are feeling disenfranchised from religion. But that was the one time I did feel very, I remember feeling so angry that me not believing in a God would be something that would disqualify me from being president of the United States or like running for government, that I would have to like lie basically and say I believed in God in order to do that. So yeah, I think you make a good point that just because it doesn't maybe directly isn't directly impacting my life in a negative way, it has maybe a societal impact for a lot of people depending on your identities and your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important, and you pretty much summed this up, but just to note that like this perspective on religion and faith are very much from three privileged people who have not experienced religious trauma. And I think that that's an entirely separate conversation. Like, I feel like that's, it is obviously part of this umbrella, but when we're talking about, there's no way we could fit everything in, we couldn't, the whole kind of system of religion and everything that it has done. Like, I think that would be really difficult to do in a couple podcasts, but I do want to just like recognize the fact that we have not experienced religious trauma in that way. The last thing that I wanted to say was a quick note about like prayer. And I know that this is not like, this is kind of like me giving like what I do with prayer. So it might not be interesting to people, but I think that the way you structure prayer is also really important. So I think a lot of people kind of wish for illness or sickness to be taken away or for protection, which are all like valid things to want. But I don't think that necessarily the universe. It's like I'm talking to Douglas.
Yeah.
But like, I don't necessarily think that the universe or a higher power, a higher energy responds to like blanket statements like that all the time. I think it's much more constructive to kind of phrase your prayer in terms of your individual self and what you can do or how you can process. So, if I'm going through a hard time, a blanket prayer could be, please like fix this, like take this away, versus like a more structured internal prayer could be like, please show me some different like alternatives to the situation, or please help me find more compassion with myself in this situation, or asking questions like, how can I find more compassion with this person in this situation. I think that makes it a little more clear. And I do think in those times you end up getting more out of an intention like that.
I feel like it's important to note too that even if you have no, like, let's say like you have no belief in God, you have no belief in the universe, like nothing. I think those
Mhm.
questions and like using
Still,
prayer as a
yeah.
tool still can be beneficial because it gets you thinking
Totally.
about like, what do I need? So I
Yeah.
think your point is a good one, Ken, that like using, like reclaiming the word prayer in order to
Mhm.
just be like intention setting for you and yourself, or you and the universe, or you and God, like whatever you believe in. I like that concept.
Totally. And also people forget in religion and in spirituality all the time that you are a very active participant, like Mal loves to remind everyone of, which I am obsessed with. Like you are part of that system. Like it's not some other people doing things to you. It's not other people planning things for you. It's like you are the most important player, no matter what you believe. So I think that's also important to remember. Like Mal said, even if that's just you think it's you, yourself, and I, and you, yourself, and I. Does that make sense? And when you
Me,
die, like
myself, and I.
yeah, at the end of it, like even then, like that's still an important thing, an important reminder.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a
I
good place
love
to
that.
end.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Woohoo.
Let's dive in. Yeah.
Ken's like
this was a great one.
exhausted by this conversation.
I'm like just the month I need to confront everything I've been avoiding.
Our themes always come at the right time. They really
They
do.
do. They show up.
They show up. Maybe there's some sort of meaning in having our themes when they are.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Full circle.
Full circle. All right. Well, I'm excited for this month. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Any final things we want to say?
No, I gotta
good.
go get Dougie out of his kennel.
I gotta
Gotta go
pee
down some
super bad.
ibuprofen.
Yeah. We
Nice.
all have needs
Alright.
that we need to take care of. So we're going to hop off. Appreciate
Yeah.
you all. Goodbye.
Goodbye.